This is Computing Up, conversations about computation writ large, with Michael Littman and Dave Ackley. This episode was recorded June 12th, 2023.
Dave.
Hey, Michael.
How you doing?
I'm doing all right. How are you?
I'm good. I'm back in Rhode Island for the first time in 6 months, almost 6 months.
Wow. So, I mean, the government really owns your time, don't they?
Well, part of it is, I mean, they let me go back, but it's a long drive. So it's a lot of Route 95 and you know, I've been avoiding it. Though I think I may have waited too long because the house, like things happen if you leave a house unattended for 6 months.
It's true.
Like other people visit and they leave things in the trash.
We did when we did the first sabbatical way back when, we basically had the place here was unoccupied for months at a time. It was a little scary, but it was all right.
So it's good to be back, but I had a question for you.
Sure.
Have you written any good books lately?
I've sort of read a couple of okay books. Does that count?
Well, I was thinking we both recently had some experiences doing some book writing, and maybe it'd be fun to share the process with people.
Okay. So no, I have not written a book lately. I wrote a foreword to a book that my dad actually wrote the book, and that came out in like February or March of this year or something like that.
Wow.
And it's out in paperback now, and one can actually get it. It's called Companionate Caring, an Ethical Philosophy of Life.
Companionate Caring, an Ethical Philosophy. Okay. Yeah, is that a word that's be introduced in this book?
It's not. It's an actual word, but it's so much rarer than compassionate caring that almost everybody mistakes companionate for compassionate when they're talking about it. But in fact, So right, just the very brief story of this.
Okay. And just we heard a page turn. Was that an actual physical book that you've got? Because I've never seen it.
This is here. Here it is.
That's lovely. How did you get a book cover?
Well, I mean, this is published by Ingram Spark on demand. So my friend Dick from 7th grade, he's my oldest best friend, and I worked on this together. And he designed the cover, and here's my dad on the back.
Oh wow!
And stuff like that. And because he spent a career in publishing at Barnes and Noble. And
this is Dick who did that.
Dick did, yeah.
Okay.
And so he helped me out with this. He also did an incredibly close read of the manuscript and found little typos and also fixed up all the references, which were incredible. So it wouldn't have happened, or if it wouldn't have been anywhere near as clean and good, except for Dick's help.
That's amazing. Now, I don't think I ever met your dad, but I was there for his memorial service.
Right. Yeah. Well, he died in 2008. And he was born in 1919.
You read that off of the book.
I read that off the back of the book. Yeah, I'm not great on dates
specifics.
So he was a post-war baby, meaning post World War I, like that. And he got his PhD in philosophy at Boston University in 1948. And was taught philosophy a little bit at various times, but then mostly he eventually became a university administrator. And my sister and I mostly grew up on Stony Brook on Long Island when he worked at what at the time was called State University of New York at Stony Brook, but now has since been renamed Stony Brook University, which feels completely wrong to me, like that. So we grew up in Stony Brook because he was in the administration at the university. But also he was, there's this very weird little flaky thing in the grand scheme of things called the ethical culture.
I was going to say that the memorial service was at Ethical Culture in New York City.
In New York City, that's right. A beautiful, beautiful building that they have on the west side near Central Park. Uh, um, and so the ethical culture movement is a non-dogmatic personal fulfillment kind of religion of people just trying to understand what makes people good and how to be good and how to be better and how to be good and to do good, without being because God told you or anything like that. And my dad was the first leader of the Long Island Ethical Society back in the late 50s and early 60s, something like that. And the
And did he bring that
later
with
on,
him from someplace, or did he learn about it and then just instantiate it there?
his PhD in philosophy was on John Dewey, who
Of the Dewey
has
Decimal System?
no,
No.
who does lots of stuff about ethics as well as education and the society and so on and so forth. So
Wow.
it was a kind of an ongoing thing in his life, but it was also, I mean, quite a shock to the system. I mean, the funny thing is, his dad, my grandfather, was a Methodist minister. And his grandfather was a preacher, riding on out hellfire and brimstone stuff around the Midwest,
Oh, wow.
around the turn of the 1900s.
So
And
that's his version of it, in a sense.
so exactly. So his dad's great grandfather was this hellfire and brimstone preacher, and his dad was a Methodist minister who was also became the president of Green Mountain College in New Hampshire, I think. And there's actually a building there, or there was, called Ackley Hall.
Oh, wow.
At Green Mountain College. Unfortunately, Green Mountain College didn't survive the pandemic.
Oh my gosh.
So it's shut down and it's been bought. The land has been bought by other folks that are going to make, I don't know what, some kind of destination brewery resort or something like that out of it, last I checked. I only found that out recently.
The internet thinks it was in Vermont.
Vermont, yeah, absolutely. I knew that because
Green
my
Mountain
grandmother
boys.
lived in Vermont because her husband was at Green Mountain College.
Wow.
And so the great grandfather was hellfire and brimstone. The grandfather was Methodist. The father was ethical culture. And then there's me. And we're still trying to figure out what exact religion I am preaching. And I hope to actually lean into that a little bit more over the next few years and kind of own it, because I sort of feel like I try to avoid being too preachy, and as a result, I am extremely hard to understand because I try to be sort of sciencey, which is fine, but a lot of folks don't have the language to actually make sense out of it. So my dad.
So the ethical culture thing really resonates with me because I was. When we were raising our kids, when our kids were young, we joined an organization called Humanistic Judaism. So it's like cultural Jewish people, but the belief system was much more in line with ethical culture. It was about doing the right things, and God is sort of irrelevant, if not basically agreed to not exist.
Right, toned down.
But definitely toned down. And there doesn't get nothing is justified by, well, this is what God wants. It's like this is what people want. This is what's necessary. We honor these people. We don't thank God. We thank people for food and stuff.
Right. Like then it says, instead of thank God, it's thank goodness, because people being good is what's important. Like that. And so, so very much, I have described myself, including in my tenure package, as a computational humanist, which I expand as meaning, I think we are all machines. And I actually care preferentially about how things turn out for the human machines, like that.
And that's really important now. I just read an article where some some influential tech people are saying, look, AI, if it's not yet a being, it's going to be a being shortly. And why should we get to decide that, why should we stand in the way of that being? And if it wants to extinct us, that's wrong of us to stop it. And I'm thinking, no, it's still okay to preferentially believe in our kind of machine. So I'm glad that that's actually an explicit part of your belief system.
Well, except I also believe that we could have children that are not human. We could give birth to machines that have a humanity, even if they don't have Homo sapiens DNA like that. So eventually it's going to be necessary to parse a distinction between human and being made out of human meat. Like that, way the hell down the road.
Right. This is
nowhere close.
GPT-7, it's going to happen.
Yeah, right. And there never will be a GPT-8.
GPT-8 everything.
There you go. So, but that's another discussion. But for me,
Dad, yeah.
Yeah, well, the point being that for me, I'm happy to embrace computational paganism.
Computational paganism, which is different than computational humanism.
It's a generalization of it, that wherever we see patterns out in the world that are doing physical work that looks like they're doing that work to preserve the pattern, then we call that life. That's, by definition, that's what life is. Life is systems that do work to preserve the pattern, like that.
So now I know you have these beliefs because you've expressed them multiple times on the podcast and in other conversations. I guess it never occurred to me that was a belief system akin to a religion, though.
Yeah, well, so, is ethical culture a belief system akin to a religion? Is the blend from philosophy to religion, so like the ethical culture folks, they say non-dogmatic, like that, so that there could be kinds within religion. And I'm happy to let the religion word go, but I'm gonna talk about spirituality. I'm going to talk about community. I'm going to talk about ritual and all of this stuff as all being important. A lot of the trappings of religion as it's often delivered have important computational purposes, I think. Like praying, for example, is a obviously computational wise thing to do in moderation, because it's making explicit what you want. And it's easy to forget. It's easy to not be clear about what you want, and it's easy to forget that that's what you're looking for. And praying brings it back to the front of your mind and makes sure you have the language to explain it. And that is useful in itself. So that's one example.
And so praying isn't always just, I pray for a new bicycle. It's sometimes praying is like, I'm trying to be a better person. I'm trying to just to keep in touch with your values and be explicit.
I'm fine with it being, I want a new bicycle.
Okay.
Because that keeps it in mind. It keeps it in the front of your mind. I want tassels. I want clothespins with cards going,
I see. So, right. You're saying useful to the individual. That's not necessarily useful to society, but that's not what you were saying.
No, I'm talking about for as us as individual machines, performing prayer can be useful to making things more profitable for us as individual machines, like that. And it's just kind of, doing a little head fake from thinking that if there isn't a miraculous God listening to the prayer, then it's worthless. No, this is the whole point. The important point was you saying it in language out loud, or, in your mind when you're doing the prayer. That has computational purposes that can be profitable all by itself.
Okay.
So how the hell did we get here?
All right. So then so your dad was an administrator, but trained as a philosopher, and he had this belief system, and he wrote it down.
Well, so, so he did this. He was the first leader of the Long Island Ethical Society. And later he was one of the senior leaders at the New York Ethical Society, which, as you say, is where his memorial service was in 2008. And, so ethical leaders do a lot of the stuff like preachers do. They have Sunday talks. They don't call them sermons, but they kind of are. And he also read them on the local radio in New York. He would give these talks, and he wrote essays which were that were published in various places and so on. So he did a bunch of writing. And around the turn of the century, around the turn of the millennium, between 1997 and 2001 or something like that, he tried to put it all together. And he wrote a big chunk of a book about an ethical philosophy of life. And that manuscript, which I found many years later, I mean, I knew it existed, but I had never done anything with it, is what became Companionate Caring, like that. So we just took it and cleaned it up. And as far as I can tell, looking all through his computer files, which started out as Word Perfect files and later were converted to Word files and so on. As far as I could tell, he never actually named the book. So I made up Companionate Caring based on reading the book, like that. And so again, for me, on the one hand, it was I seem to have real trouble doing anything the normal way or doing anything not 100% myself. And that can be challenging when it comes to having collaborators and colleagues like that. So you're one of the few who has been able to successfully work with me, or vice versa. Well, you've worked with tons of people. I've worked with fewer. So I was figuring. I wanted to learn about self-publishing. I wanted to learn how to make books and just put them out there, because, this is the modern world. You're supposed to be able to do that.
It could turn out to be useful later.
That's what I thought. So last summer of 22, I guess, I had this idea, maybe I could do a starter book. So since none of my stuff was ready to go yet, but I could publish something else. And I thought, hey, there's that stuff that I got from Dad's computer in 2008. He had that book. It was almost done. Maybe I could finish it up and put it out. And so that's what I decided to do. Wow. And that's what led to Companionate Caring coming out.
That's amazing. So it's serving multiple purposes, right? One of them is it really is honoring your dad and his legacy and his philosophy. And another one is it gives you practice publishing books.
I learned the workflow without doing the actual work. It's a classic me move.
Wait, so could you give me like one takeaway from the book and one takeaway from your process of learning how to self-publish?
So at a very, very brief, high level thing, Dad has a supervillain in his book, and that is the idea that ethical behavior, doing right, is primarily about following rules imposed top down to benefit society, to maintain social order. And he goes all the way back to frickin' Plato, because he's a philosopher, because Dad is a philosopher, Plato a philosopher too, to see that whole mindset that doing right is obeying rules to maintain social order. And that, to him, to my dad, seemed fundamentally wrong and fundamentally broken. And he spent much of his life thinking about that and trying to understand what he thought was a better way of looking at it. And so this book, Companionate Caring, is his attempt to express an alternative to it. So maybe I will read just the absolute first paragraph of his text just to set the stage. And okay, here we go. What I propose to do is both ambitious and radical. It is to outline an ethics which will serve as a philosophy of life. A philosophy of life is usually regarded as more comprehensive than an ethics, for it provides a perspective, a view of oneself, of others, and the world, which aids us in deciding what kind of person we want to be and how we can improve the quality of our life. And ethics, while also concerned with values, is looked upon rather as a constraint, valuable but irksome, which limits us as we seek our satisfactions. So then he goes on to say that he believes that that's the wrong trade-off, that it's not about doing what's right versus doing what pleases you. And if we can get these things lined up, you'll do both at the same time. You'll be doing what's right and you'll be doing what's pleasing you. And we all would be better individually and as a community and as a society if we could do that like that. Nice. So that's his, as he says, his ambitious and radical. Goal. And he just starts. So he goes all the way back to like the rise of Western society. The Renaissance is really where he begins with when technology started to feed back onto social freedoms in the West, and this whole idea of the great transmutation, that society changed from an old feudal top-down into this bottom-up, new things coming up, new things forming all over the place. And he points out how people have tried to understand what happened during that Western history transmutation in the old-fashioned top-down terms, and they really can't do it. And the classic example is Adam Smith's invisible hand. What a piece of bullshit that is. That you have markets where everybody's just doing what's good for themselves and just doing whatever they can think of to do and all that. And yet it all comes out. It's coordinated. It works effectively. So let me read one more quote and then I'll push on. So he's talking about this, that everybody thinks that, the great men of our society that made society the way it is today. So he was talking about John Locke, and he had been talking, John Locke was part of the transmutation. In this, Locke was like the other great leaders in the West as it modernized. All of them knew what they objected to, and some of them knew what they wanted, but none of them got what they sought. Luther set out to reform the papacy, Columbus to reach Cathay Spain to increase its wealth, the English parliamentarians to restore what they took to be the constitutional tradition of the Anglo-Saxons, Newton to show the rationality of God, Hegel to show the rationality of history. These men made great discoveries, had momentous insights, or contributed significantly to movements that shaped history. But the most important effects of what they accomplished were what they would have considered side effects. Like that. So it's not like there's some top-down organization and it all makes sense. It's all something else. And that leads into the meat of his story, which is he thinks the better way to look at it is we're all these dynamical systems. You have to look at it in bottom-up energy terms with these networks of interacting systems. And once you go that far, and it's funny because, he and I used to talk about dynamical systems and stuff when I was doing artificial life, and people like Varela who defined, autopoiesis and self-organizing systems and stuff like that. They're in the book. They're in there. He cites them, that sort of thing. And then, and once you take that attitude that really it's all this bottom up stuff that's forming networks and everybody is interadjusting in the context of everybody else, and there is no top down hierarchical structure, then how do you want to understand those dynamical systems in human terms rather than just in laws of physics and energy and stuff like that? And his point is what makes those networks work is caring, is these systems that choose to care about each other. And then he reinvents the whole idea of what caring even means. I mean, he doesn't invent it himself. He invokes a philosopher named Nell Noddings, who I eventually did try to trace down, and she died just a couple of years ago, so I wasn't able to get in touch, who was sort of a feminist philosopher to some degree. But she talked a lot about caring, and the idea that caring used to be, putting rules into the thing that you're cared for. It's a burden for the carer, to care for something else. And the job is to inculcate the rules of social order into the thing being cared for. And Nell Nodding's position was that misses the point entirely. And really what caring is about is receiving the thing that you are caring for into you. And it's essentially empathy. The way that you care for something is by caring about it. And that once you do that, then you're coupled together and the network system flows in different ways and so on. And so Dad builds up that approach, that it's about receiving the other. And what does that mean? That he then takes to the bank. I mean, the guts of the book is looking at, obligations. So the old way, one last quote, and then I'll stop. Oops, wrong page. To be caring was to sacrifice what one really wanted in favor of what one should want. Ethical conduct required control of feelings thought to be based in human nature, and so alternative views were dismissed as romantic or sentimental. That's the way it used to be. But with Nell Nodding's approach, she described caring as a complex of feelings, motives, and conducts which affirms another while enriching oneself. And that just seems really, really right. Anyway, so, I'm not a philosopher, and Dad's book for my reading as a computer scientist, on the one hand, it maybe it bogs down a little bit in spots, because I want to think, well, the old way is so obviously wrong. It's kind of a straw man or something like that. Do we need 260 pages
to beat it to death,
to beat this thing to death? But then as I read through it, I have to admit, well, he's kind of, it sneaks in there. It sneaks into all these other things. It sneaks into other approaches and other ways of talking and so forth. So he tries to pound it all out. And so anyway, so that's it. So that's the bit about the content of the book itself. Yeah. You asked about a story about the process of publishing a book very quickly. One of the things I learned is there's an important decision you have to make called, should you mark a book returnable or not? And when you, in this new print-on-demand universe, you can make your files and they get approved and all that kind of thing. And there's tons of stuff to do as far as like getting a Library of Congress cataloging number and So we learned a ton of doing all this. But one of the things you have to say is the book returnable? And in the publishing business, traditionally, publishers allow bookstores to return copies of the books they can't sell for credit, like that. And that is the tradition of how it's always been done. And as a result, if you do not mark your book returnable, very few bookstores will order it, period. On spec. If someone walks into a bookstore and says, man, I really would like to buy a copy of Companionate Caring, can you get one for me? The bookstore will say, sure, I will order it for you. But then it's pre-sold. The question is, would they buy a dozen copies or a box of 25 or whatever to put them on the shelf? And if they can't be sure they're going to be able to return the ones they can't sell, they won't do it. The problem is that the cost of the return shipping and the cost of giving the wholesale price back to them is all on the publisher, which is me. So if any significant number of copies come back, you can end up in the hole. You can eat the profit of selling 10 books by having one that gets returned, like that. I'm making up numbers, but it's like that. And so as a result, I said, screw it. I said, I marked it as not returnable. So you will not find it in your local bookstore. But on the other hand, if you go to bookshop.org, you can type in the name of your favorite local bookstore and then buy it through bookshop.org.
Oh, wow.
And they'll get a cut. The local bookstore that you choose will get a cut. So if you're sort of anti-Amazon, then that can be okay. like that. But it's up there at Amazon and BarnesandNoble.com and all of these places. One can buy the Companionate Caring, and we sold a couple copies, including a few that we don't know who bought. So that's the story, man.
That's amazing. And now I didn't read the book, so I can't vouch for the book, but you did give me an early version of the preface that you wrote, and it was fantastic. Forward. Thank you. It was just so great. It was your voice. It was very insightful and gentle, like warm and funny. And it was just a delight to read. And so it definitely made me feel like, if I'm going to read a philosophy book, I would like to continue on reading this one.
Right. Well, thank you. I did feel okay about how the forward came out. And it was sort of giving me a little bit of a clue that, if I'm just talking about things that actually happened, as opposed to trying to pompously present my theory of everything in pompously pompous land, then it's easier. I can just spend the effort to express what really happened as concisely and with a little bit of humor and a little bit of heart as I can, a little bit of compassion for the events that are happening, like that. So
I am a compassionary.
Yes, compassionary caring. But it's as typical as for all the stuff I do. It's all completely me. Nobody else. I mean, I was lucky to have Dick helping me out, putting it all together like that, and that can be contrasted, I know, from your experience, because you're writing a book too. And where is that at now?
Yeah. I finished it last spring. So the book is written. The release date is October 3rd. So it should be available
2023, 3 months or something.
Yeah.
And does it have a final title now?
It does. It even has a draft of a cover design, which has not been finalized, but all the variations that they showed me all look like they were more or less the same. So presumably it's going to be something very much like the ones that they showed me. It's called Code to Joy: Why Everyone Should Learn a Little Programming.
Why everyone should learn a little programming. Okay, so it's a punny title to let people know what they're getting.
It's you might be surprised to know that the punning doesn't stop at the title page.
It's
There's
not like
punning,
you one and done on that.
Not one and done pun, but in fact fun and fun pun. There's puns up the wazoo.
Done and done.
Now I had my Dick, as it were, the person who read mine closely was I worked with an editor, so this is an MIT Press publication, and I thought, so I'm working with a publisher, so presumably like it's not self-publishing, like they'll do everything, I just have to write the book and then like watch it all happen.
Right.
Turns out
really.
There's that mainly what the publishers, their focus is on marketing the book. And so they really had very little to do until like now, the stage that we're in now, they're very involved, and I'm in.
And like with all these 18 different covers that look the same.
Yeah, there's right. So we had done the index and the title was a thing, and then the cover and where it's going to be available and how I'm going to talk about it on social media and who are they going to get me to be interviewed by and so forth. So they have a whole machine that seems to be running
the marketing machine
around the marketing, but that seems to be mostly what they're about. So they were very intensely involved with me at the beginning. I talked to an editor that I later learned was the acquisition editor. In other words, acquiring the book, acquiring me. And then they really didn't have much to say until the marketing. So the middle phase, it felt very self-publishing. Like, for example, I had to get all the images. I either had to make them myself, or I had to arrange for rights to happen. And so MIT Press wanted from me proof that I had rights, but they weren't going to help me get those rights or even tell me what the process would be.
That surprises me. I thought that would be a kind of thing that a publisher would do.
They said get the rights. I'm like, I don't know how to do that, but maybe you can help me. They're like, we don't know how to do that. I'm like, that's interesting. So I hired someone who does that. I hired editors, because I wrote the book chapter by chapter. I would send it to the editor who I was working with, and she'd be like, "Looks great." I'm like, "Huh." Was expecting a little more feedback than that.
Yeah, a little more notes.
But like maybe that'll come at the end. So then I sent the last chapter, and I'm like, "I'm done." She's like, "Great, we'll send it out for review." I'm like, "Wait a second. I thought an editor like gives you a hard time, like actually like busts your butt." So it turns out there's 3 kinds of editors that I dealt with in this project. One is the acquisitions editor, who I'd been sending all this stuff to, but that was not really her job. She's kind of the big cheese,
Right.
run the show kind of editor.
Well, close the sale.
Close the sale, but she's also involved in coordinating all the other people who, like the cover people went through her, and the marketing people go through her. So she's kind of the
executive editor.
Executive, yeah. But then, and they hired a line editor, basically a copy editor, right, to go through and decapitalize every time I capitalized the word chapter, for example. Right. So there was a lot of that happened.
And that was on their dime.
They paid for that. Yeah. And that, I think that's standard. They make sure that happens because they probably don't want it to go out without a round of that.
Right.
So the super high level editor and the super low level editor, that's part of the standard package. But I had accidentally negotiated in my contract for a middle kind of editor, which was called a developmental editor, to help me with that middle level, which is what I was expecting, which is, here's a chapter, person reads a chapter and says, this whole section doesn't really fit with the others. Like, if
this other thing should go first or whatever.
Exactly. Right. Like, so looking at this kind of tactical level of how does it be arranged? Like, what is the tone? Okay. Does this joke land? And so I had accidentally negotiated for that. And so they paid for it, but only because I had apparently, leaning on some savvy that I didn't know I had, made sure that was part of my contract.
So not only that there was going to be a developmental editor, but that they were going to pay for it.
Yes. Because
both of those things, what I imagine would have to be in the contract.
Yeah. Well, because I told them I was just really worried. Like, I wanted it to be successful. I wanted to be able to connect with people. I'm used to writing scientific papers. Like, I know that audience somewhat, but I don't know this more general audience. Like, how do I learn to do that? They're like, well, I think what you're talking about is developmental editor. I'm like, I think I really need that for this to work. They're like, okay. So then after I had sent in the book to the acquisitions editor, I said, when does this middle level happen? Because I'm really uncomfortable. And she said, oh, well, a developmental editor could do that. Why don't you hire one? We'll pay for it because it's in your contract. So I had to, they gave me a bunch of names.
But you had to find one. I had
to find and choose one.
You had to pick one anyway.
Yeah. But she was, the MIT press was really helpful in identifying a bunch of people they had worked with that they trust, because I wouldn't know where to begin.
Sure.
I got a list of names. I called the first one up. Like, we had a nice conversation. He was this, I describe him as basically being Larry David. He's like a crotchety Jewish guy, but pretty funny, but like in a little slightly edgy way. But he had tons of experience with these kinds of projects, and he seemed great. Then once I like, okay, this guy could work. I talked to the next developmental editor possibility, and I just said, okay, let's just cut to the chase. How do you feel about humor? And she said, I think this topic is too important for you to be joking about it. I'm like,
next.
Thank you for your time. I need to go now, because I can't like, that's how it's good. That's how it's written. At that point, it was already written. But even in the beginning, I tried to write in like Carl Sagan's voice, like, this is important and it's philosophical. It's epic in scale.
Right.
And I don't sound like me when I talk like that. And so I decided, wait, maybe I should instead channel John Oliver. Like, or just, it's like a late night comedian. Like, I think that's more my speed.
Go for the joke.
Or just work it in, like, make it part of the way that things are being presented. Be a little self-deprecating, because again, when I was just talking about how important I was, I didn't believe it. I didn't think anybody else would believe it either.
Right. Well, so how does Carl Sagan avoid that? I mean, because he certainly does the sweep of the cosmos and all that stuff. And
yeah, but I think he believed it, and so that really makes a big difference.
It does help, I suppose.
I don't know. I got nothing else, and he did it well. Like, he knew the philosophical and the sort of humanist side of things well enough that he could tap into that and make it feel like this is part of what it is to be human, like to ask these questions and to be in this universe. That's one of our most fundamental. See, I'm doing it now, and I can't pull it off.
Well, no, that was working to me.
Then I hit a wall.
Yeah. It's like you're running off the cliff and then realizing, "Wah!" um, but John Oliver is. I mean, I can see you going in that direction. I mean, that seems to fit in with my Michael model that could be that kind of way, where he actually understands the stuff. He understands it a lot, or he gets his people train him up, so he's really got it. But then he'll do just a straight gag, just a stupid pun,
or a cultural reference,
a cultural reference, and so on and so forth, just so that it's goes down easy, like that. So you decided to pick the first guy on the developmental editor list. You didn't even call anymore after the first two?
No, I talked to everybody on the list that I was given, but it was sort of easier after the second one. It was sort of easier because okay, you have a pretty high bar to get over,
right?
And I ended up hiring my daughter too as humor editor, so she read the whole book, like checking for the joke. She ended up checking very much for sensitivity of jokes, like if the butt of the joke was a group that doesn't have a lot of power, don't punch down. So she caught me a couple times there. So that was really helpful. And so not that I was meaning to punch down, but sometimes just the frame of the joke
it's really quite hard to get it all right. But you just make sure it's always white men that are the butt of it, and then you're fine.
Well, usually all my jokes are me, and I am a white man, so that kind of works. But yes, there's more care that one needs to take. Well, so anyway, so I wrote the book in Google Docs, and that made it really easy to share. So I simultaneously shared it with my developmental editor and my daughter Molly. And so they were reading it at the same time and leaving comments, and then started to read each other's comments, and then started to have discussions with each other about me as if I weren't there. And several times, like, they became really good friends. So my young daughter and this old editor guy,
crotchety old guy,
they became really like very, very close.
That's very cool.
And would often team up against me and outvote me on things that were like, this is my book. They're like, no, but we're like, I agree with her. You're wrong. Like, you shouldn't do that. That's a mistake.
You have to change that.
But okay.
Did you genuinely come around on most of their things, or did you just completely knuckle under, even though in your mind you're going, it's better the way I did
it? 6 of one, 6 of the other. So one of the things
half of one,
I
6 dozen of the other.
Yeah, 6 dozen. So I definitely I find it hard to take criticism because I think it's hard to take criticism. So like it's hard not to feel like they were attacking me.
Yeah.
Me. Like, you're just basically saying, like, if you were smarter, you wouldn't have written it this badly in the first place. Like they weren't saying that, but that was what I was hearing. And so I eventually got to a point where I had a little slogan that I would recite to myself, which is, they're trying to make the book better. You want to make the book better, don't you? I do want to make the book better. And so that, for what it's worth, that always took the edge off. Like, this isn't about me. This is about the book, and this is about how the book's going to land. And I want it to be good. I want it to resonate with people. And if I'm getting feedback that's saying this might not be working, I want to follow that. So that's how I emotionally managed to get through that process.
That's great. I mean, sure. The phrase I use is, I know you're trying to help. Well, no, but you have to leave that off. Okay. And I mean, for me, it comes back to this whole thing about the crit in studio art class. When you stick something up on the wall, when it's your turn to do a crit, the fact that you stuck it up on the wall is license for them to say whatever that strikes them. And you can't argue with what they say, because they say what they saw. And if that's not what you meant, that's on you. You shouldn't have made the piece go that way so that they would think that's that sort of thing. Like,
so how do you know this? I only know this because I accident is the wrong word. I co-taught a class that had that structure on like robotic design. And so I learned it from my co-professor. How did you pick this up?
Well, because from like 2000 to 2010 or something, Elena took a tremendous number of studio art classes
Oh,
at UNM, in first in photography and then in various, leading up to a whole bunch of oil classes and so on and so forth, like that. So I learned about it from listening to her talking about it and just making up my computational theory of the crit, like that.
as you are wont to do.
Yeah, exactly. And so, the point is you have to shut up because you chose to put it up on the wall. Maybe you had to do it for your grade, but nonetheless, you did. And that means they can say whatever they see. And it just is, that could be more or less helpful to you. Like that. If they just say something which is very superficial and very glib, then you might just say, well, there's really nothing I can do about that because I need to assume that my reader is trying a little bit, something like that.
Unlike you,
But
crit
on the
person.
other hand, because of the rules of the crit, that means no matter what they say, it's merely data. You are not obligated to act on any of it, and you have no guilt if you don't, like that. So that's the deal, and that helped me a lot. And I started teaching it in like software engineering classes
Oh, that's
at
brilliant.
UNM, when I would do the more senior classes in programming, where there would be design reviews and stuff like that, and people would be hurt, when I would be critical, and I would say, no, 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 you don't get it. The person doing the crit cannot be wrong. The person expressing what they saw cannot be wrong. It's all on you, but you get to ignore it, and no matter what, with no
I see.
failing.
I
So,
see. So that's
uh,
the two misunderstandings that make crits painful. One is that they're saying what they're saying to be mean and not just they're just saying what they see, that
right,
they as if they have a choice over what they're going to say.
right,
And the second part is that you're forced to listen to it or you're forced to
exactly,
take it on board. And
exactly.
so that's really good because those kind of can't those yin yang each other back to a place where it's like,
Right.
no, you can survive this process.
Yeah, it's a different set of rules, and people don't understand it,
Uh,
and they forget that they moved first. They forget that they hung it on the wall,
yeah.
like that, which was inviting reactions, and therefore the reactions you get can't be wrong.
So can you connect this to reviewers of scientific papers? Because as an NSF person, like mostly what I'm concerned with is
Yeah,
reviewing. It's
yeah,
about getting assessments and feedback on people's grant proposals, and we'll occasionally get people writing back to us to say the reviewers were wrong.
yeah,
And what we want to be able to say, and I don't know how to say it always in a nice way, but like what we want to be able to say is the reviewer is it's what you said, is the reviewers
they
providing
saw
that
what they
data.
saw.
And if you really wanted them to see something different, you should take that on board as a suggestion for how you might
How to,
redesign
that's
the
right.
document so it won't have that effect next time.
Yep. How to move the things that they missed further forward and make them more redundant so it's harder to avoid and so forth. And, and to some degree, certainly my experience both on NSF panels and as a victim of NSF panels, is that it's all
That's
pretty
not our preferred
freaking,
terminology in the foundation, by the way.
it's a pretty freaking random process, like that, because everybody's busy and you just don't know how much real attention you're going to get in and how much, benefit of the doubt to even get started. People can get pissed off from your title. And then
Right.
you almost
No,
surely have an
lots of them.
insurmountable mountain to climb and you're going to get a -2 or, whatever it is. So yeah, absolutely. And I think that's the right answer. I mean, so like when I submitted the paper for the conference, that just happening this summer, I got one negative review and two strongly positive reviews. So it all came out fine. But, I had to chew my cud over the negative review, even though the crit rules totally applied. And I told myself, hey man, you sent this in. You submitted this. You said, judge me, like that. And if this guy or whoever it is, whatever their preferred gender is such a dipshit that they couldn't get it, then okay. And in fact, I even sort of felt it was okay because in the text of the paper, I kind of tweaked sort of top down traditional science approaches in a couple of little places like that. So if somebody was really hard on for top-down traditional science, this would aggravate them. And I think that is in fact what happened here. So in fact, I even went around and kind of took it as a success.
Yes, I pissed them off.
Exactly. Anyway, so your editor and your daughter editor forced you to make it better. Then what happens?
Oh yeah, then eventually got turned in because it's an academic publisher. They're obligated to get peer review, like anonymous peer review.
Wow.
Which
because this is, after all, supposed to be nonfiction.
It is definitely nonfiction, and well, even if it were fiction, they could still do that. But what it's supposed to be is academic, and there are definitely parts of academia where peer-reviewed publications of books is how you get your, tenure and whatnot, right? It's part of your actual promotion process. Sure. Not for me, but first of all, I got all the whatever tenure-y things that I'm going to get. I already got, and second of all, it wasn't for that. It's for a different audience altogether. So anyway, they sent it out for review. As in case you can't tell from the way I'm setting this up, the reviews were terrible. Like they hated it. They hated it. Nobody would read it all the way through. So there was 3 reviewers. One ghosted us entirely. One read the first chapter and was like, okay, and one read
half the first chapter.
Yeah, bits of other chapters, and just was so very angry with me. For ruining computer science for the rest of us. So that was really helpful. And we ignored all of that, basically. And it's possible one of the chapters that the angry person complained about, we did revamp that significantly, but not in a way that would have made that person happier. But it didn't matter because it wasn't being reviewed for public. Like it was already going to be published.
It was approved. Yeah.
It was approved. So it didn't matter, but it matters.
I mean, so do you have any sense why this person was so cranky? I mean, were they one of these top-down pinheads like I was talking about?
I mean, I think if you read it from the perspective of this is a book that's going to teach like intro computer scientists how to become computer scientists.
You mean like it's a textbook? It's not a textbook.
Like a textbook, but not a textbook for future like software engineers.
No.
This is going to not be helpful. And maybe it does actually put people in a weird place, like in an unhelpful place.
But that's not the intended audience, right? Code to Joy.
No, that was not the intended audience. So it was that was never the intended audience. But they did what they did. But the editors, the MIT Press people, for their part, they were like, I think they missed the point. It's fine. Don't spend too much time on this. I'm like, but why did we just killed the entire summer? Last summer 2022. The whole summer was spent waiting for these reviews to come back. And it was okay, that was not a good use of anyone's time.
Well, except that we can now say check.
Yes, but except nobody needed that checked except for maybe the publisher did.
Yeah. Okay, all right, and then now it's all just a big marketing machine, and whether you use Pantone 623 or 624 for the cover, and
it is already available for pre-order. So there's a website that you can go and actually pre-order it, or like choose which seller you want to go to for the pre-order. But I haven't been pushing that until the cover is available, because the cover is going to make it so much nicer.
Well,
so once
the
cover's
you got to have
available,
a picture. You got to have a picture.
At the moment, there's just words, and it's not.
And the pub date is in October.
Yeah, October 3.
October 3rd. Okay. And so, do you have any idea on your national book tour? You're gonna London, Beijing, Johannesburg.
It sounds like they wanted again. It's academic publishing is almost self-publishing. They're like, where are you going? Where are you going? Where you going? Like, you have any conferences or anything you're going to? And so if I'm actually traveling, they'll be happy to help connect me with bookstores.
Bookstore locally and so forth.
And so I'll be back in this area. So they'll send me to Cambridge, Massachusetts, and Boston. Presumably we'll find some stuff in Virginia to do. I'll tell them always happy to visit New Jersey and Pennsylvania because I've got relatives there. So I'll find.
I mean, I guess I've even heard that that's sort of the way it goes. I mean, so Cory Doctorow, who's I'm a big fan of, does nonfiction and science fiction and various young adult stuff. And I just got his latest book, Red Team Blues, which is actually a whodunit mystery in cryptocurrency land.
Oh,
And the hero is a forensic accountant.
so relevant. Oh my gosh.
Like that. But so I was seeing signs about his book tour, and there was an awful lot of connection to, and then he's also speaking at South by Southwest, and then he will be at the Austin bookstore, and then he's doing whatever, and then blah, 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 like that. So yeah, everybody's trying to save a buck, I guess.
My dream is to be on, well, like Jon Stewart's show, but he doesn't have one, or he doesn't have the show that he used to have, or
Right.
Colbert, but his show changed too. But like, I wouldn't mind being on Colbert's show now. That would be, that would make the whole thing worthwhile.
Well, that's sure.
I know, but
Yeah.
they don't, right, exactly. But they don't really have people like me, and the publishing company hasn't had a lot of success placing people and things like that. But I did
Right.
put apart, like, there's a whole section of the book where I basically, not a whole section, but there's a section of the book where I beg Colbert to let me on the show, because
Well,
I'm not too proud to beg.
Well, and maybe you could just be in a bit. Maybe you wouldn't sit in the chair, but you could be in a bit somehow like that. Who knows? And well, nonetheless, I mean, that's very exciting, and it's a little bit early, but congratulations for just getting it as done as you did.
Thanks.
Like that, and how all these things are a combination of exhilarating and disappointing, and let down and satisfaction by turns. And then then you have to start dealing with the movie rights. Like that. So, but how do you feel about it? How do you feel about it all done?
So I handed it in. I was like, oh God, I'm glad that I was able to finish that, because that was a process. Then when I had to reread it a couple times because they would, check the formatting and everything, I was like, okay, that's not terrible. Like, there's a couple cringy spots here and there, but it's not terrible. It's probably not, like, when I was writing it, I was definitely swinging back and forth between, there's never been anything like this. This is going to take the world by storm.
Yeah.
And then this is like the most inane thing possible, that it really provides no useful information to anyone. Like, there's no, like, you intersect all the Venn diagrams, and there's this empty spot in the middle where people who would benefit
Point
from
of this book.
Yeah. So the truth is probably somewhere in between those extremes. And part of it is just being able to say, published author, yada yada.
Absolutely.
And so
absolutely. Most recent book, Code to Joy.
Right. Author of.
Yeah.
We have Professor Michael Littman on the show. Yeah. So I'm super glad. I enjoyed the writing process a lot. So last spring I was in Atlanta, and I was spending most of my time writing. I was not teaching classes. I was not going to meetings. I was just writing, and it was such a fun time. Like, at the end of the day, if I had written a couple clever things and maybe a few jokes that I liked, and actually covered a topic that I thought was important in a way that I hadn't seen before, I was just so happy.
Wow.
So I would I decided, I know I've heard you've said, one of your slogans is, I don't like writing, but I like having written.
Yeah.
And I actually kind of like the writing, and I felt bad for that, because I'm like, I can't go against Dave's slogan, because that would make me weird. But
but you finished a long thing. I mean, what's our page count here?
Some number of 80,000 words, so like maybe 200 some odd. Oh, actually, it's a PDF, so yeah, it's like 220 something.
All right. I hate writing because I love rewriting, and I love having written, and I can't finish anything longer than 10 pages because it's too painful. And so I need to find what you found, to just enjoy getting it out there, and then say, it could be reworked and stuff. But no, that actually fits in that hole that I wanted in subsection 3 of whatever, like that. So we'll see. I mean, I think my slogan wasn't really meant to be prescriptive as so much as just a reflection of my own personal reality.
See, but that's when you tell people stuff, sometimes it lands.
I know. Sometimes it sinks in, and then I say, "Oh, sorry about that." Well, that's super exciting, and I'm sure on Computing Up we'll cycle back around to touch on it when you're on your book tour or whatever, and maybe we can get you to come to Albuquerque for some reason and give a book signing in Santa Fe or whatever like that.
My daughter's on her way to Santa Fe by driving right now, so I was like, "Oh, you could stop and." No, never mind. It's all
everybody's supposed to do a cross country trip after college.
Yeah, that's I never did, but she's doing it.
And well, okay, maybe we should wrap it up. So we are committing to have guests again one day upon Computing Up.
I have a plan.
We have a plan, so hopefully everybody will hear from us again in about a month, and we'll take it step by step from there.
Outstanding. Thanks for chatting. Thanks for telling me about your book. It was really exciting.
Well, again, it's my dad's book,
Sorry.
big time publisher here. So, all right, we'll talk again. This was Computing Up. Thanks for listening.